Another Sunday night win for the Phoenix Suns as they move to 5-1 on the season. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll break down the win over the Rockets, 124-109, as well as how the Suns are making do and will continue to make do without Deandre Ayton. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendan Clean, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. We are free. We are everywhere. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all of them. Hit follow, hit subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're finding us on so you do not miss a single show, and you can get them all for free just by clicking. That's all you got to do. The best way to support it, the best way to keep it free is to listen. So go ahead and do that. You can also follow along at Locked On PHX Suns on Twitter, where after every single home game all year long, we are doing our 7 words or less game takes. So I have at Jake the Oliveira, win the ones you should. I have Brian Abdallah at YoungFocusBA, happy birthday book, just keep stacking wins. So we'll be putting those out, call for action from you all after every game. So Twitter can be a great place to hang out on game nights as well. But let's dive in. 124-109 is the final score on this one. The Suns also won on Sunday, 124-111. Little bit of a quieter game with Zion out, Ingram out, etc. So big win for the Suns Friday. We're not going to spend too much time. We're going to hit this Houston game pretty closely. And then look big picture at the Aytonless stretch that is in front of the Suns here. Ankle sprain in that Friday game. Played only 7 minutes. He's out tonight. He'll be out at least a week. So that's the schedule. Today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. More from them later in the show. Again, 124-109. And I think as I look back on this Houston game, and the reason I say this one was had more interesting stuff in it than the Pelicans game, which the final score was actually closer in the Pelicans game, is how it ended. Because Houston had a 30-point third quarter, outscored the Suns 30-25. And so heading into this fourth quarter at home for the Suns, they were only up 4. And Houston, look, like we all just watched them, they're a very undisciplined team. They're a very young team. They probably reminded you a little bit of those old Suns teams where it was Book and nothing else, right? But they can get hot from 3. They have individual talent. And so this was a test in its own way for the Suns. And what they did, and we should not be surprised. We shouldn't have allowed ourselves to get so off base, because what they did is exactly what they did all of last year. They slammed the door shut. This game did not actually get into clutch time. If you remember last year, the Suns were, just unparalleled in terms of how they performed in the clutch. The last 5 minutes of a game that's within 5 or fewer points, that's how the NBA defines clutch time. So if you go on the NBA's website, they have stats that are broken down by clutch and which teams are the best and worst in the clutch. And that's how they classify it. 5 minutes or less left in the game, 5 points or fewer. So you can go in and out of clutch time, right? Because the score can go back and forth. Bismack Biyombo hit an and one hook shot and then made the free throw with 5 minutes and 1 second left. That made the score went from being a 4-point game to a 7-point game, and the Suns never let it up. But what they did is they went on an 11-2 run where they went from 102 to 114. It was really a 12-4 run is what I'll say. And at every juncture, they made the right play. So you had Bismack making that and one. Then you had a Chris Paul jumper Midrange, which is a sight for sore eyes for any of us watching this team. That is a classic Suns clutch play. Then you have bizarrely called take foul on Jayshawn Tate. Obviously, it benefits the Suns, but we can all admit that was a weird one. And then from that point on, Booker takes over. And that is what's so special and cool about this team is they can just juggle it like that. They can pass it off. And so Paul gets the pass to Bismack for the and one, the mid-range jumper, and then that transition take. He makes the free throw. And then from there, it's Booker. So Booker draws two at about the foul line when he's driving in, kicks it to Cam Johnson for an open corner three with 3 minutes left. Then the ball goes again. Booker gets it into the teeth of the defense. He kicks it out to Chris Paul for a three on the right wing that just barely misses. And then last but not least, a three by Mikal Bridges at the 2 minute and 1 second mark, also assisted by Devin Booker. And so that really would have been 9 points on back-to-back-to-back possessions, all assisted by Booker, all because of the attention that he draws. And what's crazy is I think this is an offshoot of him driving to the basket so much, drawing so many fouls this year, is he didn't even have to drive and kick in the way we really think of it. This was not, Russell Westbrook, a freight train to the basket and then kicking out to three. Booker demands so much attention at all three levels that he can patiently dribble into the teeth of the defense, stop at the foul line, pump fake for the jumper, and then get it. The defense is so broken by that point just because of how scared they are that he can generate an open three for a teammate with just that. He doesn't have to threaten a dunk on your head in order for you to collapse inward onto him. He can do that from the foul line. He can do that from a pull-up three, right? He has the respect everywhere, and it makes everybody else's life so much easier, and the Suns were able to turn that into a win tonight. On the whole, I was skeptical they would be this type of clutch team this year. But heading into tonight's game, they had played 2 clutch games. They had played, I believe 30 minutes of, no, that can't be in 2 games. 15 minutes of clutch time, and their net rating was plus 25.9. So if you extrapolate out those 15 minutes across 100 possessions, the Suns would be outscoring their opponents by basically 26 points per 100 possessions if you were to blow it out from what those small sample is to 100 possession full game type of deal. Plus 25.9. That was the 6th best mark in the entire league behind Portland, the Nuggets, the Raptors, and then a couple bizarre ones with the Thunder and the Spurs. Number 6 though. And that's without Chris Paul necessarily looking at his absolute best. That's without, Deandre Ayton for a couple, well, I guess tonight's game didn't actually get into clutch time, so Ayton would have been in there. The rotation all jumbled. The Suns have still been doing that. They are the number 3 offense and the number 5 defense. They're the 2nd best net rating team in the NBA. All of that was heading into this game. They're bringing the clutch stuff together. The rotation's getting locked in. We'll talk about that coming up next. And I just didn't think between the lineup changes, the lack of depth, Chris Paul, not sure what he's going to look like, how much are they going to include DeAndre Ayton, all these things. I was skeptical. I just didn't think, despite how all the pieces can fit when they're at their best, it's just really hard to replicate that season after season to be so good when everything is most intense. And it looks like through the first couple weeks of the season, the Suns are going to pick up right back where they left off, and that is just such a killer weapon to have. We saw it countless times. That's part of why the Suns racked up wins last year. That's part of why they've been so dangerous. They have that structure, that recipe that when games are close late, they don't get freaked out. They go right to business, and they tend to win those games. And they did it again tonight. Another big reason, though, is their bench. Another thing I was wrong about. I will dive into this bench and how, even without DeAndre Ayton, they are finding a way to get it done. First, today's show, guys, once again, brought to you by BetOnline, which has you covered all year long for betting football as well as basketball. Pro season, the college season, both getting kicked off here this fall. So find the latest player developments, team matchups, news podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all sports wagering info with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Monday night's NBA odds are already up, and the Suns championship odds, I had to check on this because I was blown away. The Brooklyn Nets were higher than the Suns to start the season or preseason. I believe the Nuggets were higher. The Miami Heat, the Dallas Mavericks, I think all these teams were above the Suns preseason. Now, the Suns are 5th on the list at plus 1,000. The Clippers are still ahead of them, which feels a little tasty. The Suns are going to continue to move up this, so if you want to get in locked in now, plus 1,000 looks pretty good. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf, not to mention football and basketball, of course, is BetOnline. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So not only did the Suns close the door on the Houston Rockets late in this game as their young guys were not able to mount a legitimate comeback, the bench also kicked in and really contributed to this win. And there's a couple things normally in the post-game shows, if I'm just reacting to one game alone, I will do the bench mob vibe check. And in this case, I want to talk a little bit about Ayton and the injury and everything to close the show. But the bench is still fascinating. But bigger than just tonight, I kind of want to put it into context. So what we are seeing is, a heck of a coaching job, I would say. And the players doing just enough to work together, kind of figure it out, and cobble together some competent bench minutes. So obviously with Ayton out of the lineup, you saw it. Bismack Biyombo started the game. He was in foul trouble early, played only 22 minutes. I think, though, even though he did have foul trouble, this is probably going to be about where he lands minutes-wise, because you look in the bench and Jock Landale was at 23. That's about an even split. Maybe both of those guys play about 24 each to get to 48 center minutes each game while Ayton is out. And then, if somebody has foul trouble, maybe if Landale is scoring really well, or maybe if Monty thinks there needs to be a little bit more of a defensive look, then Biyombo gets a few more minutes. But I think splitting it right down the middle is probably what we're looking at. And that has stabilized things. I posted on Twitter that I predicted Bismack would start. But what that's allowing the bench to do is, once again, settle into place. Landale being on the bench, staying on the bench, even though maybe you might think he's better than Biyombo or he's had a better season, certainly. Biyombo plays more of a role the way that Ayton does, right? He's going to be able to defend, anchor the defense. He's going to be able to play the pick and roll. And then in the bench, you can keep building this chemistry. And I think that's the biggest part of this so far to me is that. And we'll talk about it from the standpoint of Ayton going forward. But I want to get to the bench specifically here as well. Landale is the thing that is starting all of this off and allowing the chemistry to develop. We've talked about connectors for such a long time with Frank Kaminsky, Aaron Baines, Dario Saric. Monty loves to have these ball-moving, floor-spacing centers who can kind of keep things together. Now, Landale has not really been a floor spacer, which is kind of what's interesting to me. You would think with Payne wanting to play in space, with how fast they want to play, it's surprising that Landale can fit into that at the same time that he also is able to fit into, just getting post-ups. Like, he is still a guy who is getting, a few hook shots a game, a few legitimate post-up opportunities, scoring ISOs. Like, these are old-fashioned types of plays. But then at the same time, he'll get a transition seal, or he'll get a nice just layup, running on the floor. He can do all of it. He got 5 offensive rebounds tonight. He also was in a little bit of foul trouble too. So again, the minutes we'll see. But what that's allowed everybody else to do, I think, is not have to do too much. And if you're watching Dallas, it's a little bit of an aside, but if you're watching Dallas, I don't think JaVale McGee, I think his time here looks worse as we get further from it, because he's not helping too much in Dallas so far. It's very early. I'm not saying he'll not be valuable to Dallas. I think he's a serviceable player, but he does a very specific amount of things, JaVale McGee does, right? Like he's going to plant himself at the basket defensively, and if something comes his way, he'll try to swat at it, and then he'll be there for the rebound if it doesn't go in. But he's not going to make a massive difference. He's not going to switch. He's not going to stonewall you. He's not going to, communicate and anchor in that same way. And on offense, like he's going to roll to the basket and look to score, right? And he's going to grab offensive rebounds if they're there. But he's not going to necessarily be somebody who makes the players around him better. He's not going to be somebody who the versatility is something that makes a big difference. Like he's going to do what he does. And if other guys can fit into that, great. If not, then not, And so Payne, I think he's shooting 43% from the field. He's averaging 9 points a game after tonight. That's not elite. That's not special. That's not jumping off the page. He's not going to win Sixth Man of the Year, but he's doing enough. So 5 of 12 tonight against Houston, 2 of 7 from 3. He had 4 assists, 3 turnovers. Not his best game. The turnovers, I think you probably jump out the most in just 17 minutes, 3 turnovers. But 4 steals. His defensive intensity has been great. I like that he's not taking all of his shots from 3. He's been better from 2-point range, so he's 3 of 5 tonight from 2-point range. Overall on the season heading into this game, he was shooting 42% from 3, which would actually be his worst as a Sun, but he's shooting more of those than he has a lot of nights, less threes, and I just feel like his groove feels better. He's not hurting the team as much. Shot selection's better. He's able to lock in on defense because he has that number 2. And I wonder if maybe what it was more so than, last year it became sort of a joke about Cam Payne and Dario Saric playing together. And I get that. It's a little ridiculous to say that Dario being out was the difference between Cam Payne being a big difference maker and being awful. It doesn't add up. I don't think, and what I think Monty, when he said that, and fans, when they would joke about it, were thinking about was a lot of like the playmaking, right? That connecting stuff. Dario being able to be somebody who can play make from the elbow, play make from the top of the arc, and dribble handoffs and all that good stuff, passing to cutters. But what I wonder if it was even maybe more than that is the scoring pressure. Because I think last year, the thing that McGee didn't provide is he's not really a threat, right? The way he's going to get the ball is predicated on somebody else. He's not going to pop on some possessions. He's not really a post-up guy, although he does have the hook shot. He's not really somebody who's going to get offense in a bunch of different ways. And so, yes, he could score in theory, like he could put up points, but he's not creating. And so every time down the floor, the Suns' offensive structure was all going to be Cam Payne trying to score, right? That was the only real option. And obviously, you can look back and say they won 64 games, so what's the big deal? But we know by the time the playoffs came around, and even at a lot of moments in the regular season, the bench was a weak point. And when you talk about the clutch like we just did, that also I think you could point to and say, well, the Suns were only in so many moments last year where they had to win clutch games because the bench kept giving up leads, right? The Suns would, their starters might leave the game in the third quarter with the 10-point lead. They come back, it's 4. Now they're in clutch time. So having Landale at least just be there and be a threat to score in a variety of different ways, I think that's really freeing up the Suns bench to play a different style, to be less predictable. And you're seeing that trickle down. Landry Shamet already getting more minutes than Damian Lee since returning. Landry Shamet had 10 points tonight, 2 of 5 from deep, 3 of 6 overall. That's really, really good to see. Lee, you just trust him. He's going to make his open threes. He's going to make smart decisions with the ball. He might have some nights where he gets, 3-4 assists. Might have some nights where he gets 5-6 rebounds. He's big. He has good size. He knows how to play defense. He is what he is. But I think we know Shamet's more dynamic than him. Payne's always going to get those minutes. And Landale's a real threat. The Torrey Craig spot, who knows? I could see that shuffling, right? Maybe it's a little bit more Dario sometimes. I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe Josh Okogie plays more as the season goes along. Who knows? But that's a bench unit that is making it work, that is figuring life out together, and I do think a lot of it's Jock and the trickle down of having him in there. Let's close things out talking a little bit about Ayton specifically. a little bit more about the, I guess, contingency plan, so to speak, after he sprained his ankle against New Orleans on Friday night. First, one more quick break. Deandre Ayton reportedly, per the team, going to miss at least 1 week with a left ankle sprain. And I have a few thoughts on this. One, let's start with him and the injury specifically. Now, I think we have this perception of Deandre Ayton that's kind of that he is injury prone. And I think some of that's from his first season ends with an ankle. He misses the last handful of games in the season. The second year, obviously, is the suspension. And right when he gets back, I believe he had 2 different ankle sprains after returning from the suspension. One was like his second or third game back. I believe it was against the Clippers in December. And he got hurt right away. Then there was a game when he came back, I believe, is when Monty started the Baines-Ayton lineup, which was a hilarious little moment. I think that actually only lasted a few games too because Ayton got hurt again. But after that, since that point, I don't really think it's fair to say that those injury problems have stayed with him. The COVID-shortened season, not the bubble year, but the following year with Chris Paul's first season in Phoenix, Deandre Ayton played 69 of 72 games, played 31 minutes a night, made significant strides as a player, heavy, winning basketball, strenuous minutes, and he only missed 3 games, right? And that was a year where a lot of people had COVID. I wouldn't be surprised if the 3 he missed were COVID related. Last year, obviously, an 82-game season. He only plays 58, so he misses 24 games last year. But I believe he missed 4 with COVID, so that already means really he only missed 62 because that, you're not going to blame him for getting COVID. Everybody got it. He missed, I want to say 7 with 7 with one injury, 5 with another. I believe it was 7 with the ankle. So, okay, again, an ankle sprain, but only 7 missed games. And then the other one was 5 for what they called like a lower leg bruise or something like that. And I'm pretty positive that was a 5-game season. So that's 12, right? And so the 4 from COVID, the 12 from those 2 injuries, that's getting you to 74 games. I don't know what the other 8 were. I think they were things here and there. And so, okay. Let's say it's 62 out of 82. That's not great. But I guess if you have one season where he barely misses any games, you have one season where he misses 20 games, tonight, or this week, he'll miss 4, 5, 6, 7, something like that. We'll see. I don't feel like it's a big problem. I think he's been healthy for both of the past 2 playoffs. When he is playing, it's not like he's constantly going out or falling on the ground or, dragging over the course of a game and, showing that he's hurt in any sort of way. Like he's not, obviously, if you're hearing that, you're probably on the same wavelength as me. Like Anthony Davis is a guy like that, right? Where even if he's not hurt, you notice it in his game. He's had this lower back tightness. It's always something, and AD has had this lower back tightness this year, and you can watch him play, and you can tell his back hurts, right? Whereas Ayton, it's not like when he comes back from an ankle, he's grabbing at it, he's not running as hard as he normally, you don't notice it on him. And so I just look at this as maybe it's just part of life. Devin Booker always has hamstring stuff. He's going to miss a handful of games every year from that. Chris Paul always has hand problems, right? He's had like 3 hand surgeries. He missed a couple weeks last year with the hand thing. It happens. Everybody has a body part that's a little numb, a little weak. And maybe it's ankles with Ayton. But if he's missing 10 to 20 games a year, but other times he's missing like 0 games, I don't care. I can't find myself getting that worked up about it. So in the meantime, I think, off the top, it's incredible that the Suns have a third center as good as Bismack Biyombo. They also have another big man who is not even playing right now in Dario Saric, who's better than most fourth bigs in the NBA, even if we know Dario is seemingly not fully ready physically to be playing because he's not playing, and I don't know why else he wouldn't be. They also have Torrey Craig, who can play small ball 5, whatever. The Suns, we talk about them not having depth because the bench is a little bit of a question mark in terms of like championship equity and are they going to beat this team or that team in the playoffs? That's what we mean when we say the bench is not great. But overall, in terms of like count up the NBA caliber players on this Suns roster, there's a lot of them. And a lot of them play big man positions. So the Suns are capable of weathering this storm. They showed it last year when, once again, we just talked about Ayton missed 24 games. I don't know what the Suns' record in those was, but they won 64 overall. That's the other injury that I missed. I believe it was an ankle. That right at the beginning of the win streak, when Frank Kaminsky started going off, Ayton had gotten hurt as well. That was the missing chunk of games that I didn't count up earlier. They won with Frank. They won with JaVale later in the season after Frank went down, and Ayton missed some of those games later in the year. They just keep winning. Biyombo can get the job done close enough. I believe, so when you look to come full circle here at Biyombo and Landale, they combined for 6 blocks tonight. They had 3 combined on Friday night against the Pelicans. And I think, we know how Ayton's defense works, where he's a lead on defense, very, very high-level defender who doesn't block a lot of shots. But McGee was a guy who blocked shots. And if Biyombo and Landale are going to put up those types of numbers in the shot blocking department, they will make a heap of impact. Rebounding has also been a place. The Suns destroyed the Pelicans on the glass in that game, which they were playing very small because their starting 4 was Najee Marshall, who's like technically could be a 2 guard. But Jackson Hayes, Larry Nance, they didn't really rebound too much, and Valanciunas only got 10. Tonight, the Rockets actually won the rebounding battle, but that's a lot because they were missing so many shots, and so a lot of their rebounds were on the offensive glass, and they were just because they missed a lot. And so rebounding is another area. The 2 guys, the 2 centers tonight combined for 12 rebounds. Against the Pelicans on Friday, they combined for 15. So if they can rebound, protect the rim, and finish at the basket, and Landale can kind of do his thing in the second unit in terms of playmaking and shooting a little bit more, they're going to be just fine. This team has plenty to beat regular season teams. I am going to be fascinated with this Timberwolves matchup because they don't have as much maybe size as they would like. Biyombo's a little undersized. Jock isn't quite as, mobile as maybe a Deandre Ayton would be to guard Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe that's the one matchup where they really struggle. But other than that, I think the Suns are going to be just fine. I don't think Deandre Ayton is some sort of injury risk, and I think the Suns are built to survive an absence from him. So if you look at it that way, there's really no harm. Let him recover, rest him up, no need to rush him back, let DA heal, and we'll see when he gets here how much better they can keep getting. But they're 5-1. They're gonna keep winning games no matter what here, and more biz time, more 5-block Biyombo nights. I think we can all get behind that. That'll do it for today's show, guys. Happy Monday. 2 Suns wins over the weekend. What better way to celebrate a Monday than coming off of wonderful nights of basketball? We'll be back tomorrow and the rest of the week, so do not go anywhere. Hit follow, hit subscribe. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. Make sure you do not miss a show, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.